Another coaching candidate is off the board. And that's good news for Penn State.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football in this head coaching search. And as always, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credential media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Special part of the show where I sit down with Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football, Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators, and we're going to have an expert roundtable analyzing where things stand with Penn State, Florida, James Franklin, just analyzing this unprecedented coaching carousel. But we got to start with top headline news here as Matt Rhule is staying at Nebraska. And that's good news for Penn State for two reasons here. And I'll explain what Matt Rhule, why he's going to stay at Nebraska, aside from, Penn State going in a different direction there. But what's the impact of him actually staying at Nebraska and being a potential threat in the Big Ten, right? Penn State's going to have to go up against him routinely. So this means that Penn State is going to get one of its preferred coaching candidates. And when it came to Matt Rhule, I didn't think Matt Rhule was a bad candidate, but in comparison, you could do better. Okay. This move, if Penn State were to hire Rhule, how much would it have moved the needle? Because I understand the argument that, well, he played under Joe Paterno. He's from State College. Okay, he's a Penn State legacy. I understand that argument. I really do. But it's not like Matt Rhule offers something different that Penn State hasn't had before. And I think that's where Penn State is. Penn State's at a crossroads right now where you can actually leap forward if you make the right hire, which is why they're targeting the likes of Joe Brady, or particularly as of late, Brian Hartline. So for Penn State, this means that they're going to get one of their preferred candidates, because I think if they ended up hiring Rhule and really pushed for Matt Rhule, that would have been damage control. It's so that you got a competent, capable coach. I believe that Matt Rhule would have done well, but what does that look like? When Penn State's fans' expectations and the administration, when Pat Kraft comes out and says, we expect to win national titles. This is a national title type of job. That Matt Rhule doesn't necessarily fit that. That could change, but it's not going to. He is committed to Nebraska, I think, after 2030. So good for Nebraska and Matt Rhule. I'm glad that Rhule has found a job that's stable for him, that believes in him, because Penn State fans would have been questioning the hire from the start. And I don't think that's fair to him when he's at Nebraska right now. His family's comfortable and Nebraska believes in him. I see a lot of Nebraska fans that said on social media, and people like Will Compton, for example, who played linebacker there and played linebacker in the NFL, and we're saying, stay away from Matt Rhule. And Penn State fans would counter and say, we don't want him anyway. You can have him. And then it was stay away from Matt Rhule. So I think everybody got their wish at the end of the day. Now, where do things currently stand with Penn State? Because there were recent reports that said they're in the initial stage of finding a head coach, hiring a head coach. And I don't know that that's necessarily, this changes day by day. So are they at the beginning stages anymore? No, absolutely not. They were the biggest player in the head coaching carousel before LSU and Florida got in. And again, it's to each their own, which is what we're going to debate in the next couple of segments here about which job is the best. Well, Penn State was the best job at the time and got to make the first phone calls. So where things stand is Penn State has certainly narrowed its list of candidates. And that's part of the reason why Matt Rhule he probably got a phone call, or he probably reached out to Penn State and said, hey, what direction are you going in? I'm interested in this job. It would make sense. He's an alum. Would totally make sense. But then as things progressed, as time moved on, I think Penn State said, we're going in a different direction, which is why Matt Rhule probably went back to Nebraska and said, okay, let me stay here and build something special. But the names that continually pop up, what I'm hearing, for Penn State. It's Brian Hartline. It's not Brian Hartline or bust, but Brian Hartline is certainly the preferred candidate at this point in time. Originally, it was going to be, hey, go shoot for the stars. Mike Elko, Kalen DeBoer. Well, that's a lot more difficult now because they keep winning. So they're going to go deep into the postseason. But I hear Brian Hartline fairly consistently. I hear Jeff Brohm fairly consistently. But the same thing, if he wins the ACC, if he goes into the postseason, are you willing to wait that long and set him up, not for failure, but just an uphill battle right out of the gate when Penn State fans and the administration expect success right away? I would hope if they do have to go that route where they're patient, that Penn State fans would be patient. If you bring in somebody, you get the home run hire, but the first season, there's going to be a lot of speed bumps along the way. I hope the administration and the fan base would offer some grace, knowing that you got an all-star candidate, but he's not necessarily set up for success in the first year, depending on which avenue you go. And Brian Hartline, how long would he stay with the team, right? What would the logistics of that be? Because Hartline and Ohio State are going to have a deep postseason run, and he's not going to show up until later on in January. But what if you build a staff that can do all of those things for you, right? So there's a lot of things that Penn State has to consider, has to balance. I keep hearing Bob Chesney as well of James Madison, not as much as Jeff Brohm and Brian Hartline, but those are the three. And then Joe Brady as well still, but does he want to stay in the NFL? He's linked to the Tennessee Titans job. So those are the four candidates that I've been hearing the most. The preference is Brian Hartline going to Jeff Brohm. And then together, I would say Bob Chesney and Joe Brady are kind of in a similar category for different reasons as that third tier of candidates. Now, Matt Rhule staying at Nebraska. I wanted to finish up with that because, again, he played at Penn State. So I like the idea of more alum on staff. So I think Penn State should make it a priority, if that's Brian Hartline or whomever else, to find a way to keep Terry Smith on staff in a prominent role. Who knows if he'll be the associate head coach or what happens, but he needs to have a prominent role. Dan Connor, same thing. I like former Penn State players, Trace McSorley, Jordan Lucas, being on staff. So the idea of Matt Rhule being the head coach wasn't too off the wall to me. I thought that would have been a fine hire, but it didn't move the needle. So staying at Nebraska, that's a good spot for him right now. They're in the middle of a rebuild. They're trying to get back to the top of college football. And why go a bunch of steps backwards? With what Matt Rhule, this is in respect to Rhule and Nebraska. Nebraska should want to keep Rhule. Rhule should want to stay at Nebraska. Why are you going through year 3? You're in year 3 of a rebuild. And why would you just scrap all of that when you've actually seen tangible success? You're actually moving forward. Nebraska is not necessarily a threat to Penn State when it comes to recruiting or anything else like that. But I want to see them at the top of the Big Ten. I want to see them be a team that, hey, year in and year out, they can compete for a college football playoff, and at least they're on the right track. I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm just saying they are taking the steps. They're following a blueprint that can get them to that spot where they can be a top 12 team, at least a fringe top 12 team at the moment. I don't think they're going to be a powerhouse under Matt Rhule, where they're top 4 in the country year in and year out. They're a national title contender. That's just not them. Okay. But can they be a fringe playoff contender year in and year out if they continue on this track? Absolutely. All right, we're going to get an expert panel together. Spencer McLaughlin, myself, Brandon Olson. We're going to talk about what this coaching carousel looks like from all perspectives. Penn State, Florida, the SEC, James Franklin, where he could end up. That is all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets. That's right, $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And that's to use on everything. You get those bonus bets, you can use them on NBA basketball, NFL football, baseball in the postseason, college football, Lines are available for Penn State versus Ohio State. If you're interested in that game, Ohio State is a heavy favorite, 20.5 points on the spread, minus 1,600 on the money line, plus 900 if you're thinking Penn State for a full-on upset. The total is set at 44.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. And remember, new customers get $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
The coaching carousel as wild as it has ever been. And I have Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions and Brandon Olson of Locked On Gators because those are two of the biggest openings in the country. Seyko, I want to start with you. Where's your head at right now? Where are Penn State fans at with regards to not having James Franklin as the head coach? Season that had national championship aspirations is over, done, looking forward. What is it like in Happy Valley?
I mean, it seems like old news to this point, right? Most of the fan base is pretty optimistic that Penn State can be a national title contender. And I believe so too. I believe that this is a top 10 job. Florida's up there as well. Conservatively speaking, you have two hosts that covered two top 15 programs in the country, objectively speaking, at a minimum. So both schools believe that they're better than what Billy Napier was bringing. They're better than what James Franklin was bringing. It was the concept, but it's 10-2. You're going 10-2. It was being 0-16 against all top teams since 2017. That was what got James Franklin fired. And then the negative momentum of how one loss turned into two, because it's one thing to lose to Oregon. It's another to lose to UCLA and then Northwestern. So that is where things stand. But no, Penn State fans, for the most part, there are cautiously optimistic ones that say, Franklin was good. And most of them say, we can be better. And I agree.
Brandon, what about down in Gainesville? Is this, here we go again. It's the Dan Mullen situation once more, where we're looking for a new head coach. And what are we going to do? And now we're scarred even more because of the last 4 seasons of Florida football. What's the overall mood in Gainesville?
I think pretty good right now. I think everybody, regardless of what actually happens, I think most of Gator Nation right now is riding the lane train. And so whether or not that happens right now, we feel pretty good about it. I personally feel pretty good about that happening. And so I think right now we're riding the lane train. We know that we're not getting resolution. And so there's going to be a lot of unrest there. But for, I think, most fans, we go, hey, probably going to be Lane Kiffin, or most fans hope it's going to be Lane Kiffin. But I do think that the stark difference from when Florida hired Billy Napier after firing Dan Mullen, which, by the way, was a good decision. Not hiring Billy, sure, but firing Dan Mullen was a good decision. We're not doing the revisionist thing. He quit on the program. He deserved to be fired. He also had 70-something ranked recruiting class and was like 9-6 in his last 15 games at Florida. It's not like he was still winning a bunch of games. But so I think that there's that, but now the cupboard's not empty. When Billy Napier came in, he's like, hey, this is going to be a multi-year rebuild. Like, we got a lot of work to do here. You don't have that. If you have a coach and bring in a coach that can retain most of this roster, and for once in what feels like my life, a somewhat favorable schedule for next year, comparatively at least to the SEC, what we've been dealing with, then yeah, I think that you can look at the right coach with roster retention, could come in and compete for a college football playoff spot right away. Let
me throw a couple of things at you here, Brandon, and Seyko.
Say the wrong thing, I'm going to throw something at you.
Yeah, well, we're in two different countries.
Florida.
Right, yeah, there it is. That's what I was going to say.
I get back next week.
Let's say I understand Lane Kiffin being the top target for Florida fans, and I talked earlier this week on my show about how I can see him going to LSU or Florida because those are better jobs. I don't think he has to. I don't think he's in such a bad spot in Ole Miss now and going forward to where if he wants to accomplish his goals, win an SEC championship, compete for a national championship, I don't think that he's incapable of doing that at Ole Miss. I think it's easier at the other programs if he carries over what he's done in Oxford to either Gainesville or Baton Rouge. But let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say Lane Kiffin sticks it out with the Rebels, wants to continue to build on what he's already built there with that program. Would you ever, in a million years, Brandon, consider hiring James Franklin to be Florida's head coach?
I have considered it. I'm strongly against it.
How come?
I don't think he's a national championship caliber coach. Like Zach has mentioned, you've had resources at Penn State. I understand there's going to be people that go, oh, okay, well, recruiting in Florida, you have an easier Florida pipeline. James Franklin did a pretty good job of getting Florida talent every so often in Pennsylvania at Penn State. I don't think he is a championship caliber coach because he's come so close so many times. He's had all those 10-2, 10-2, 10-2, like Zach mentioned. I think that with James Franklin, and there are some coaches who won't have the best record against top 10 teams or top 25 teams. And that's fine. But I do think that with James Franklin, a lot of his failures were his own fault. I think with Lane, you can look at some of the resources available at Ole Miss and say, hey, he doesn't have the resources to build a fully deep and talented roster. I think James Franklin had those resources. I think James Franklin just screwed up and wasn't good enough. And if you weren't good enough to win a national championship at Penn State, I don't want to make the assumption that you're going to be good enough to win a national championship in Gainesville. And that's what I'm looking for. Like administration can feel different. Fans can feel different. When I'm talking about who I personally want, it's a guy that I think can come in and compete for a national championship. And I don't think James Franklin can do that. So yeah. I'm out on James.
I'm with you on that front. However, Seyko, I want you to weigh in on this, and we'll get to Penn State candidates and whatnot. I don't think James Franklin is done being a head coach. Like James Franklin to Virginia Tech, James Franklin to Wisconsin, I think those are very real. I don't know about Florida State. Because what I see with Franklin is what you talked about, Brandon. I don't think he's a national championship kind of coach. But right now, what Virginia Tech and Wisconsin are looking for is to reestablish their brand, get credibility back. Like they need a stabilizer. Before Tim Skipper got things rolling this season at UCLA, I think he'll end up being the full-time head coach there in Los Angeles for the Bruins. If that hadn't happened, I would have considered James Franklin for that job more heavily. But I suspect Seyko, based on what he said on College Game Day and how it all unfolded at Penn State and what I still think he can be, I think he winds up being a head coach somewhere next year. I don't think it's at a tier 1 school for football. I think it's at a tier 2, like a Wisconsin or Virginia Tech. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think you'd be spot on for that, but you also have to factor in Franklin's ego, okay? This isn't a criticism. This is just how he thinks, how he operates. He believes that he is still the kind of coach that can be at LSU, can be at Florida, and should be the preferred candidate in the same conversation with a Lane Kiffin or a rising star like maybe a Joe Brady out of the NFL. Just he's at the top of Penn State's, odds makers say for Penn State and LSU, right, that Joe Brady's a strong consideration. That's where Franklin believes he should be. Virginia Tech is considered a step back for him. A Florida State would be considered a step backwards for him. UCLA, I think the jobs that would be perfect for him if he's able to swallow his pride is UCLA or Virginia Tech. But I don't know that he wants that because he says he can win a national title. Well, you're not winning national titles at UCLA or Virginia Tech, okay? So Franklin believes that he still belongs in the Big Ten, at the top of the Big Ten, okay? Wisconsin and UCLA are not going to be at the top of the Big Ten anytime soon. Virginia Tech, I think, would be perfect for him because he needs to realize that his credibility has diminished, okay? It's not the same. He's still a good coach. Like you said, he'll stabilize a program. Virginia Tech would be perfect because he can still recruit very well. That is the prime spot to go in, where DC, Maryland, Virginia, outside of Pennsylvania, that was his bread and butter. He lands at Virginia Tech. That's going to be an issue for Penn State's next head coach. I'm just saying it's not the end all be all. It's not going to be fun in recruiting going up against James Franklin with his Pennsylvania connections. So with that being said, he doesn't want to be in the ACC unless he has to be.
When we get back, we're going to continue down the list. We've heard Lane Kiffin. We know that is Florida's dream boy over there in Gainesville. But if that's not an option, each of these guys are going to give their top targets at Penn State and at Florida. That coming up next.
And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIH Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat, all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved.
All right, keeping it rolling. Brandon, I want to start with you. Let's say Lane Kiffin is off the table. Who do you want Florida to hire?
If I were making the hire, or
Yes.
genuinely?
Well, yeah. Let's make sure we distinguish those two things, because there's who you guys want and who you think the administration is going to go out and get. So separate those two thoughts, but where do you think it goes after Lane Kiffin?
Lincoln Riley or Eli Drinkwitz would be I would bank on right now.
From like, that's who you want, or that's who you think the administration will want?
That's who I think the administration would be more likely to pursue after if Lane doesn't work out. James Franklin would probably be on the list up there. I think one area where the administration and I agree is over in Atlanta with Brent Key from Georgia Tech. I like what he's done so far. I would only be skeptical because I don't think Buster Faulkner would come with him to Gainesville.
The offensive coordinator.
Yes, sorry. Buster Faulkner, offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech, might get that head coaching job if Brent Key leaves. Got great Georgia ties. Also, who knows what happens with Mike Bobo at Georgia? I would imagine Buster Faulkner would be near or at the very top of that list to fill that vacancy if that happens there. So I don't think Buster Faulkner would end up in Gainesville as well, as much as I love his offense, which then leads me to say, okay, well, Brent Key, you need to now hire another coordinator. And if you screw that, like, that's the thing that gets a lot of coaches, specifically defensive coaches, is you hire an OC. If that gets screwed up, you basically flush 2 years down the drain. And then you got to hire another one, and it's a lot harder to recruit at that point when you've had some failures there. But I think Brent Key is someone that I'd look at. I don't hate Eli Drinkwitz as a candidate. I hate Eli Drinkwitz. I'll say that. I've met him
What
before.
did Eli Drinkwitz do to you? He's made Missouri relevant.
I have met him, and he was a D-bag. So he has
He
has genuinely, to me, that's what Eli Drinkwitz did. And so I don't like Eli Drinkwitz. However, I've said if you do come to Gainesville, I think you'll be able to win some football games, and I will brush that to the side if you win games for my program. That's fine with me. Lincoln Riley, I'm out. I'm good. Thanks. Appreciate it, but no thank you.
Okay. One quick thing, Seyko, and then we'll get to you. Brandon, you mentioned those guys, and they're all current head coaches.
Yep.
Is there any chance you think Florida goes for a coordinator that hasn't been a head coach, a la Kirby Smart at Georgia once upon a time, Dan Lanning at Oregon right now? You can just keep going down the list. Do you think there's any chance that they go in that direction, or is it someone who's been a head coach before?
I think there is an incredibly slim chance. I think they're looking for a CEO type of head coach that's going to come in, not be a play caller. You got a good roster. Just bring in a guy that can manage the load, and I think that's what matters when we're talking about coordinator hires. I think that's riskier. I think you have a good roster where you don't need to take a risk like that.
Seyko, is that where Penn State's collective heads are at?
I could name a bunch of names, and they all kind of have different avenues, right? They are looking for that upside, because why do you fire James Franklin if you're just going to go with Matt Rhule, Manny Diaz, right? You're going to pay all that buyout money just to either be the same or maybe you're slightly better. You need somebody with upside. You need somebody with potential. So that's why they could go the coordinator route. This is, again, based on when we're recording this, so much changes in a matter of minutes, hours, days. Brian Hartline's the guy right now that is trending, that is rising, like racing up the head coaching hot board for Penn State right now. First year as an offensive coordinator, full-time play caller, right? But he doesn't have any experience. Oregon has shown it can work. Georgia has shown it can work. Okay. Hey, even Ohio State did it with Ryan Day. Ryan Day was the full-time OC for Ohio State. One season they promoted him, and they are one of the schools that is the epitome of success in college football. Penn State, I know they went to the well with Jim Knowles. you would be able to maybe keep Jim Knowles and actually put him in a better position to succeed if you go and get somebody that he's worked with previously. You don't need Brian Hartline to fix all the issues. You need him to bring something from the outside that makes Penn State better as a program, and you can supplement the rest. You don't need Brian Hartline to be this established. And if it doesn't work, so be it. Okay, that's a risk that I'm willing to take. Roll the dice here, because the upside and the potential is there. If they don't go and say, you know what, at the end of the day, it is a little risky. We want somebody that's established. Kalen DeBoer and Mike Elko are the preferred candidates, but obviously those become more of long shot choices day by day.
Yeah.
I'm not saying those are likely. There was interest, and then, well, they kept winning. So Texas A&M and Alabama are probably going to make sure that they stay in their respective spots. Matt Rhule is still a realistic candidate because of his connections to Penn State. Same thing with Manny Diaz, Joe Brady, who I've mentioned already, offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. Those are the names to know. Bob Chesney over at James Madison is starting to gain some steam here a little bit. But I don't know what does Bob Chesney give you in terms of upside that someone like Brian Hartline doesn't. That's why it seems like Penn State needs to go the coordinator high upside route, because the head coaching experience, be darned, it works if you make the right hire and give them the right resources, which Penn State can do.
Yeah, I think that conversation overall is an interesting one, because I can just as easily give you perceived negatives or positives in both directions. I don't think there's a wrong way, whether it's the Florida job, the Penn State job. I don't think hiring a coordinator, if you feel like he's the right guy, is a bad move because, well, he hasn't been a head coach before. Well, neither had anybody before they became a head coach. I don't think Elko had been a head coach before he got the job at Duke. Had he? Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Marcus Freeman, same thing. And that's going really well, even though it started out pretty poorly. That's kind of, I think, the risk that maybe comes into play more so of hiring a coordinator is Marcus Freeman early in his he started 0-3 as Notre Dame's head coach. Lost the Fiesta Bowl to Oklahoma State, lost the season opener to, I believe it was Ohio State, and then lost to Marshall the following week. He's lost to Northern Illinois. He's lost to a bad Stanford team. You look at him now, and he had his team in a one-possession game in the fourth quarter of the national championship last year. I want to throw a name at you guys, and I want your thoughts for each of your respective programs here that I brought up earlier this week on my show, and I don't think is generating a lot of buzz because of how this season has gone. If this cycle had happened 1 year ago, tell me why Fran Brown's name wouldn't be at the top of people's minds way more than it is right now. I don't see him on basically any list anywhere. Maybe he's content at Syracuse. I think it's reflective of the fact that the Orange are 3-5. Their starting quarterback got injured earlier this season. Steve Angeli was playing really good ball. Fran Brown ties to the SEC. Brandon, also currently coaching in the northeastern part of the country, Seyko. I think Fran Brown's a really good head coach, under the radar kind of guy, up and comer in the industry. Brandon, I'll start with you. Is Fran Brown a target that gets overlooked in your view?
Overlooked, yes. He was someone that, if we were talking earlier in the season, he would have been on my list. I don't think Florida is going to look for someone that has the record that Syracuse has right now, regardless of why that's the record. I think right now the boosters and the administration, they're looking for someone that has proven wins right now. Honestly, when you were talking about someone who, if we're having this conversation last year, then the name would have been brought up. I thought you were going to go with Jeff Traylor at UTSA. I feel like he overperformed for most of his time, and then this year
struggle again.
Season. Yeah. But Fran Brown is a name that would have been on my list if the season didn't go the way that it did, but I just don't view him as a realistic option. I think he's a hell of a coach, really do. But yeah, I just don't think he's a legitimate option for Florida.
Is it because there might be the initial kind of negative response, and those things can cycle amongst fans, donors, and the like with, why are we bringing in a coach that's 3-5 right now? Like, do you think that would be the pushback to him? Because you do have to understand the full context of why he's a potentially high-level head coach in college football. I think he's done a lot of things right up there at Syracuse. But is that the reason why it maybe wouldn't be received well?
It's one of them. The other is not enough experience as a head coach. And another is that all the names I've listed were offensive-minded head coaches. And that seems to be the route that Florida is going. I also personally think that that's the better route to go. And so I think I think there's multiple reasons. I do think that if Syracuse was performing better this season, and obviously healthier with that, then he would be a more legitimate name. But I just think there's too many things working against him right now.
Seyko, would you consider Fran Brown for Penn State's head coaching job?
Absolutely, but not as that tier one, the first group of candidates that I named. And then if it came down to Fran Brown or Matt Rhule, let's just say they were the only two in that next step, I'd go with Fran Brown because, again, I'm looking for upside. I'm looking for potential. Fran Brown has shown that he can recruit very well. You could compare him to James Franklin in some sort of sense. I don't know how Fran Brown is as an X's and O's coach. I do know that he has a very positive outlook when it comes to being a CEO, being a program stabilizer and builder, and being a recruiter. And then again, you can succeed. You just have to supplement those other parts. So I think it would work with Fran Brown in Penn State. I think it would work with Fran Brown in Florida. You just have to make sure all of those shortcomings, all of the weaknesses are taken care of. So I totally agree with Brandon when he says, hey, this is just what we're looking for. Okay, we have Billy Napier. He offered a lot of that, upside, so to speak, when he was being vetted as a candidate. And hindsight's 2020 at the end of the day. You don't know until the hire or the fire actually happens. Okay, Penn State might totally fall flat on its face and be 6-6 and move down lower in the ranks of the Big Ten. That's a risk that the administration said we are willing to take because we know at the end of the day, we're going to bounce back at some point. Is that in 2 to 3 years? Ideally, yes. Is it 4, 5, 6 years later? They're okay with that as long as they still get to that spot. Okay. James Franklin had maximized his success. Everything was maxed out. He had the resources and the results spoke for themselves. You knew it wasn't going to get better than this. He was never going to break the glass ceiling. Try with somebody else. And I think Fran Brown could do that, but compared to everybody else that we've named, he's just not. In a few years, somebody's going to get a really good head coach. He's going to be in the Big Ten or the SEC soon enough. It's just not going to be this year.
Yeah, I think he's SEC bound eventually. Just the tie's already there. I think a team's going to throw the bank at him eventually.
Yeah, Well, every job in the SEC is coming open, so there will be plenty of chances, certainly, for him to get that. Any closing thoughts for you guys as you continue to just kind of sit around in college football purgatory?
Purgatory? I'm on the Lane train. What do you mean?
Yeah,
I'll say this in front of both of you guys right now. Florida's going to beat Ole Miss is my call. I'm calling that they're going to do it again.
You think they're going to do it again?
I think last year it was everybody wanted Billy fired to hire Lane Kiffin, and so it was destiny for Billy to beat Lane. And I think this year you're getting a bunch of people that are going, okay, well, Ole Miss is going to make the college football playoff, and then Florida's going to miss out on Lane because of that. And I think the story this year is going to be Florida can help knock Ole Miss out of the playoffs, and that will make Lane available earlier. That's my whole, I think, yes, Ole Miss might be the better team, but sometimes in college football, the story matters more than the game.
Lane Kiffin be a pretty strong selling point for DJ Lagway, Dallas Wilson, anybody else that wants to stick around. Seyko, any final thoughts?
You say college football purgatory. This has been one of the most entertaining seasons that I can remember for Penn State. And I know they just made the college football semifinal, but it was Boise State. It was SMU. It was the same story over and over and over and over. And since 2019, I can't remember the last time that Penn State football was actually exciting. It was here we go again. Oh, hey, look, we won. Great. We lost to another team that was slightly better than Penn State. I was tired of the same ending. This is something different. I'm willing to take multiple steps backwards to spring forward.
Zach Seyko, Locked On Nittany Lions. Brandon Olson, Locked On Gators. Locked On Gators. Great stuff today. Look at that. Yeah, fixed it in real time. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.